Today is a day of review. So the review is for me to know where you are. Because if I'm going to be presenting, I need to know where you are so I can pretty well match where you are and we can move forward. It's also for you so that you can know what I'm expecting, what I'm hoping as to where you are. Because I know this, that there are a lot of people who do not train high quality NLP. And if you so happen to suffer through that, you may have missed a lot of key things that we expect that you should know and have some skill and competency with. So the review today is really for you and me to kind of find out where we are. We're not all on the same page, obviously. Some of you probably have read a lot of books, so you've done a lot of reading and caught up. Some of you may not have read much and therefore be behind in the sense of not knowing some of the history of NLP and some of the distinctions. I always recommend that in terms of practitioner training, get practitioner training at least 2 times and possibly 3, because you're not going to get it the first time. You're just not. There's too much. And I go to conferences. I go to conferences in London and Sydney, up in Canada. I go to conferences and I set in many times classes that says beginners, because I want to hear how that trainer presents. And many times, most of the time, I'm hearing distinctions that are very helpful. Yeah, I know most of it, but the twist and some of the new distinctions are always helpful. I never thought of it like that. So the basic NLP practitioner, if you've only been through it once, I would really recommend get through it again. Go find a different trainer. Different trainers, different styles offers different perspectives, and will expand your perception of that. We start off with NLP and we ask the question, what is it? What do these 3 letters represent? It stands for neurology, so body, physiology, linguistics, so now the mapping mentally, it could be semantics, neuro-semantics, which Alfred Korzybski used synonymously. He didn't make a distinction. And so it's the language that we use to create meaning, and that when you do so, it programs you. It is a code that programs a response pattern. So the programming is we call it habit. So anything that you habitually do, that you've learned to do, tie a shoe, ride a bike, cook a dinner, anything that you do, that's a program. You've got a program for writing, for reading, for greeting, for being friendly, for getting angry, for having boundaries. So these are programs, and some of the programs are effective, some are not. Some are efficient, and some have so many loops in them, it takes forever to complete that program, whatever it is. So neurolinguistic programming is a description of human functioning. It's a description of human function. How do people function? Well, they function in their neurology, their states, their physiological states, their mental and emotional states, and as they function inside of their neurology creates their linguistic models of the world. And those linguistic models of the world then program us for our response patterns. So it's a psychology. Human functioning, human psychology. So your psyche, yourself, operates in a certain way. And two key mechanisms is neurology and linguistics. So that's where NLP starts, with those 2 big emphases, linguistics, all the languages of the mind, and then neurology, which actually is the database, is the hard drive that creates the soft drive. We want to think of it that way. So what is NLP? Well, we start with a person, and the person is always responding to something. So to understand neurolinguistics, we have to identify what is triggering you to respond. And so we start with the stimulus and the response, and that's going to be part of the TOTE model. That's going to be part of the SCORE model, the stimulus and response. You're responding to what? Because you have many different responses to many different things. So one of the grounding questions is, you're responding to what? And what's your response? Now, to understand this human functioning, we need to go inside to that black box to see how this person has brought this information in and is encoding it. So, what is NLP? It is human functioning. It is the foundation of human psychology, how it works. And the two key pieces will be neurology, or state. So we're going to spend a lot of time on state, and the state of the body, the state of physiology, the state of emotion that gets activated in this state, and then all the languages of the mind. Now, what we learned in NLP, and what was really a piece of genius, and Gregory Bateson wrote about this in Structure of Magic, Volume 1. He and his colleagues had worked for 20 years at the Mental Research Institute, MRI, there in California, trying to find a way to encode human functioning. And when the NLP people found representational systems, Gregory Bateson did the palm to the forehead. It was so obvious. It was right in front of us, and we couldn't see it. That the languages of mind are these ways that we represent visually, auditorily, kinesthetically, and some things, with olfactory sense or the gustatory sense, that the way I think boils down to these representation systems. So simple. Many psychologists, from Titchener and Wundt in the 19th century, was so close to this. They were that close to it. But then it was like it was too obvious. It's too simple. So when they found it and started identifying that we think visually, we think auditorily, with sounds and with words, we think kinesthetically, we think with our bodies, with touch and movement and gesture, we think with our smell and taste. This is how we think. So the languages of the mind boil down to the 5 representational systems. Now, the other thing that they discovered very early, and there's several different stories about how they discovered it and who discovered it, is that the fact that when you think in these ways, eyes move in certain directions, and it shows up in language as predicates. So you can hear visual predicates. I see what you're saying. I have a picture of that. Well, why don't you draw me a picture? So visual people talk with visual predicates. Auditory people, so that rings a bell. So, and then kinesthetic people, I get that. I feel that. That moves me. So they use, if you have ears to hear, you can hear this stuff. And once again, it's so obvious unless you don't know it. So I lived for years, just deaf and blind. And then when they said, you can hear this, and I started, it was like, what Fritz Perls said about Gestalt is that Gestalt is the therapy of the obvious. And NLP is the psychology of the obvious to a great extent. That if you listen for it, it's right there. It's been offered to you constantly. And once you start seeing it, once you start developing this as a program to listen for the predicates and watch for the eye accessing cues, it's just everywhere. And now you cannot not see it. Now you cannot not hear it. And so this was the foundation of NLP, that we are systematic in the way we talk and the way we use our neurology. So the eye accessing cues is neurology, and that generally when people are looking up, more than likely, it's very unlikely that they're not making pictures. And so we learn to say, what are you seeing? And when their eyes are going in a lateral movement back and forth, they're probably talking to themselves. And so we ask them, so what are you saying? That distinction can be made even finer. There's been some studies in NLP where there are 7 distinctions of the auditory movements. So you can see when people, the way they move their eyes back and forth, you can tell between whether they're inventing this talk or they're recalling a memory like a poem or a nursery rhyme or something they memorized. And you can make that distinction if you look close enough, pay enough attention to these patterns. So here's a foundation of some of the key components of how people work. And people are consistent to themselves. So one of the early problems of NLP was you can't do this statistically. Because if you start averaging people and getting a whole bunch of people and saying, so many people use their eyes this way, so many people use their eyes this way, you create confusion and a mess. It just doesn't work statistically. But every person is consistent to themselves. So this now taps into something that they got from Milton Erickson. Milton Erickson said, every client who comes in, I invent a new theory of how personality works. So that's really treating with respect each individual. Because it's not like, I know your kind of people. But it's like, how do you work? And how are you unique and systematic and regular in your functioning and production? And so taking one person and letting them be consistent with themselves, watching their patterning, their programming. So this is the foundation of NLP, where it started, and that thinking goes to these representational systems. And these representational systems, most of us have a favorite system. Do you know your favorite system? Your primary system for representing things. Do you know your secondary system? Do you know your third system? Do you have a sense of how your patterning works these together for learning, for motivation, for decision making, for whatever the experience is? So that's the first thing to know, your own patterning and how to start recognizing it in yourself. Without recognizing in yourself, you'll see through your pattern, and you'll be imposing your pattern on other people. But once you know, oh, that's my pattern, now let me set it aside and see their pattern. So this is this is why the early NLP people kept talking about go to the know-nothing state. Just stop the world, and what they meant was the world up here, the mental world. Stop the world, or as Fritz Perls said, lose your mind, the meta-mind, and just come back to the senses to see what actually is going on without interpreting it, because that's what we tend to do. So this began the definition of NLP as they started looking at this. Physiology, some of the early NLP books, if you read them, will even look at body shapes and sizes to indicate the representational systems. So if you got a tall, thin person, generally they are visual. If you got a person who has a pear shape, they are auditory. There's two kinds of kinesthetics. One is kinesthetic athletic, and one is kinesthetic relaxed. So a lot of learning disabilities is we're using the wrong representation system for a particular subject. So just like the phrase, he can't carry a note. Well, yeah, it's wrong represent. You don't carry note. It's auditory. It's not kinesthetic. So if you use the wrong representational system on a particular subject, you won't learn it. So certain subjects need auditory, like music and things. Certain subjects need visual. So that's why my commitment at practitioner level was always, nobody leaves practitioner level until they can see and hear and sense. So I want to turn on their visual eyes, I want to turn on their auditory ears, and I want to turn on their kinesthetic senses so that they have at least the three basic representational systems so that redundantly they can represent in a fuller way than if they were just depending on one. Can everybody do that? Can everybody visualize? Pretty good at visual, because if you can't visualize, how much information you're missing? And you're going to try to use the wrong representation systems to represent certain things. Can everybody hear? Tone, tempo, pitch, volume, you can hear. You can represent inside yourself different tones of voice or tempos and sounds. And then kinesthetically, kinesthetics are both inside and outside. Inside is proprioceptic. So inside would be how you're breathing, muscle tension, relaxation. It could be temperature on the inside, pressure on the inside. Outside is smooth or rough or cold or hot, and a sense of the feel of things. Now, do you know what to do if you don't have strong, vivid representations in all three systems? Do you know what to do? Do you know how to help someone do that? There's one word will summarize this one. Snapshotting. So take a snapshot. When I learned NLP, I thought I was tone deaf, and I had good evidence. Many, many years earlier, 20 years earlier, when I first went to university, I sat in a music class, and the professor eventually told me that I was tone deaf. One day he called me, he said, "Mr. Hall, come here." I said, "What?" And he said, "I am not going to have you mocking things in this class." And I go, "What?" And he said, "The way you're singing." And I go, "What?" And he said, "Okay, here's the tone, here's the tone. Which is higher?" And I went, "This one?" And he said, "Tone deaf." He said, "Sit in the back of the room and just don't make much sound and you'll pass this class." So I was convinced. I mean, authority told me that. He gave me a test. He assessed me. So for 20 years, I assumed I was tone deaf. So I come to NLP, learn this stuff. And so at NLP, I was in the shower one night, and I listened to the shower. And I turned it off. Can I represent that? I can. I can hear the sound of the shower. Turned it on, listen, turned it off, listen. Well, I was so excited. I got the TV on, you know, so I'm clicking it on and listen to it, click it off. Can I represent that tone, that voice? So snapshotting. You can do that auditorily, you can do that visually, you can do that kinesthetically. So this is the way to make your representations, your thoughts, your thinking richer, fuller, more vivid. And it's one of the gifts that we give to people, because now they can think in many systems instead of just one system. So the visual system, if you don't visualize, then just go around and look at something and make a snapshot, close your eyes or turn your eyes, see if you can see that in your mind. If you can't, look at it again. Snapshot it, snapshot it. If you can't, then let's overlap representational systems. If you're kinesthetic, feel it. Then in your mind, feel it, feel, see. If you're auditory, then make some sound. Now make the sound in your mind and see. So you can overlap. What this will do is it'll make the internal world of your mind sensorama-land. That's what it does. It just makes it richer, fuller, so that when we say start imagining things, seeing things, hearing things, sensing things, now on the inside, you've got a richer and more robust world. So here's one of the things about representational systems. The meta-representational system is words. I always say words. NLP people say auditory digital. It's words. Are you saying anything? What are you saying? Now, what happens with words as the meta-representational system, the more you read and the more you go to college or university, the more you take these things and turn them into words, and eventually these kind of fade out. So there are people who are auditory digital, who don't see or hear or sense anymore, because they're living in the world of words, the abstractions and the concepts. And those are the people who, as you turn on their eyes and ears and senses now, will be able to do the fuller range of not only the visual. Now, inside of each of those systems is submodalities. Now, submodality, take distance, close, far. Take a picture, and it's either bright or it's dull, dim. It's either small or it's large. So these qualities of the representational systems we call submodalities. We've got a whole list of these things. Where are the submodality pages? I think they're in the back here. So page 55 gives you a whole set of these submodalities. And when you did practitioner training, you probably did quite a few exercises playing with submodalities to get a sense of the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic submodalities. Now, what Bob and I discovered in 1997 or 99, we started playing with these, and one day I realized that all of these words are normalizations. Distance is a normalization. You can't put distance in a wheelbarrow. It's a concept. Closeness is a concept. Far away is a concept. So actually, that is an abstraction. It's actually a meta-modality rather than the modality. So that's why in Neuro-Semantics we don't call these sub, because they're not actually sub. And that's why you've got several of these qualities, distance, in different modalities. So how these work is symbolically. These work symbolically. So closeness stands for more real. Distance stands for less real. And for most people that works. Most people that work. But every once in a while you'll find someone who you take the image that they're scared of when there's up here, and you make it way far away, and they'll still be doing that. Because the distance doesn't mean more real, they go, it's still there. So it doesn't stand for distance. It doesn't stand for less real or more safe. So that's why the submodality itself is just an emblem, a symbol of something else, of a meaning. Now, most of the time, when you take a picture and you make it bright, it's going to be more compelling, more exciting, more moving. But here's where context comes in, and content comes in. If you take a romantic candlelight dinner and you make it brighter and brighter and brighter, does the romance get bigger? So here's where content does matter. So one of the myths of NLP, and it came from John Grinder, don't worry about content. Just call it X, call it yellow. But it does matter. Is it a romantic dinner or is it something else? And so brightness with one thing will make it more compelling. Brightness with the other will make it less compelling. So compellingness is not a function of bright or dim, but a relationship between the content and what you're doing with it, that relationship. So with each one of these representations, we've got all of the submodalities. We call them metamodalities. And even more literally, these are the cinematic features, the cinematic qualities of the representations. So just like any movie director, once you make a movie, you can make it brighter or smaller or further or dimmer. You could add circus music. And so the submodality level actually is a higher level of editing the code. So you get your basic code, and now you can edit the code. And when you edit the code from that higher level, these symbols will stand for and represent different meanings. Now there's quite a few pages in this manual on that. And the book that we wrote was Submodalities Going Meta. If you want to read a whole book on this and lots of examples. So this becomes really critical when you're looking at some experience and you're looking at the qualities of the movie. So sometimes, okay, you make a picture, but I need to know, is it in color, black and white? Is it two-dimensional or three? Is it close, is it far? And by asking these questions about the quality of the movie, I'm looking at how you've edited it, and then the effect it's going to have in your neurology. So so this is human functioning. So that's the most basic piece. I'm going to open it up for some questions. And so just to make sure everybody's on the same page as we look at the foundation here. So raise your hand if you've got a question. We'll get a microphone to you, and then we'll call up on you for that.
The question that I have is that with respect to our representational system, we tend to have a preferred representational system. At the same time, linking representational system with learning modalities. Now, the current so-called research in the area of learning modalities, they are debunking that a person doesn't have a specific learning modality. So I would like to have your opinion on that.
Okay. So Howard Gardner, he wrote Frames of Mind, which is a great book. He wrote Multiple Intelligences. And when he first wrote it, he came up with 7 multiple intelligences: visual, auditory, the intrapersonal, the interpersonal. So he came up with 7. Then he came up with 8, the natural. So these are learning modalities. And the people trying to debunk this, one of the things about scholars is I can make a name for myself if I disprove you. And that's what a lot of them are trying to do. And so I haven't seen anything in any of the written literature, the research literature, that actually validates that these are not learning modalities. And the NLP learning modalities of the representational systems. If someone makes these absolute, now they can debunk that. But we have never said they're absolute. And we know that everybody in this room and everybody you meet visualizes, talks to themselves, has sounds, sensations, smells, and tastes. Unless there's some neurological damage, there's 8 centers for visualization in your brain, but you may not be conscious of it. You're visualizing, you're just not conscious of it. I met a guy from Sweden a few years ago, and he said he doesn't visualize. I said, well, how do you know who's your wife? I mean, it's a legitimate, how do you know which one's my wife? Because you have to have some visual image that you're comparing to. Oh, you'll be my wife today. He just wasn't conscious of it. So one of the things you can do is to throw a whole bunch of images at someone who says they don't visualize, and they'll start noticing that they visualize. But they've got a belief that if I can't hold that image, and if the image doesn't look as real as this image, then I'm not visualizing. But if I say King Kong, top of the Empire State Building with a banana in his hand, and the Fast and Furious people are driving up his shoulders and around, and they jump off and they land into the ocean, and our image is coming. So it's human functioning to visualize, but you may not be conscious of it. And so people who complain that they don't, they're just announcing that I'm not conscious of what I'm doing, and helping them to become conscious of it. And so go back to the question, if you make these absolute, then yeah, you can debunk that. Because number one, we do all of these things, but to lesser degrees and strength. And there's going to be predispositions. Some people in those intelligences, they're going to be wired for mathematics. They're going to be wired for athletics. They're going to be wired for music. They're going to have a predisposition, and that part of the brain may be more fully developed to handle music or auditory. And so that's why we say they're our favorite representational systems. And if it's very strong in a person, and if they've gotten rewarded for it, when you think about rewarding anybody for anything, it's going to grow. It's going to develop, and they're going to favor it more and more. So it's one of the ways that people can get unbalanced in their thinking because they're overemphasizing just one thing. I had as a therapist, years and years ago, I had a couple bring me their 16-year-old boy. And I had to look up to him, because he was he was a big boy. He was already 220 pounds, and he played football. And they brought me a stack of papers of his cognitive dysfunctions and his learning disabilities that had been documented for years and years. And so I said to him, because I wanted to test representational systems, what does your room look like? I don't know. Well, what color is it? I don't know. Well, what shape is it? I guess it's a box. Well, is it a box or not? Is it square? So I asked him and he couldn't answer any of that. Here's your homework. Go home and look at that room, and next week come back here and tell me what color it is, what shape it is, etc. What's in it, what it looks like. And so he came back and he started telling me, okay, what does your Dad's voice sounds like? I don't know. Okay, copy it, mimic it. I don't know. Okay, this is your homework this week. Go listen to your dad's voice. Well, he played football, and I said, how do you know to play? He said, the coach draws all these drawings and these squares and these circles and these lines. He thought, I don't. The coach then takes me out on the field and walks me to here, and then to go to here, and then, he just announced, I'm a kinesthetic. And because I've been rewarded, because I'm good at kinesthetics, I've downplayed these others. So after a couple weeks of him now coming back, and his dad called me. He said, my son, every time I say something, is repeating my words. And I said, yeah, I gave him the task to mimic you. He said, would you like to tell me why? But after about 3 weeks, he came in, he could see and he could hear. And all of a sudden, all of his schoolwork went up. He didn't have learning disabilities or dysfunctions. He just did not have his representational systems turned on. So this is where that becomes really an important thing in terms of learning. Just opening that up.
Yeah, to understand the representational system and the auditory digital, we have that as what is within us, the representational system. Now, when the auditory digital comes in, does it offset that?
Oftentimes.
Okay, it offsets that. So it doesn't work in parallel or together with it. It offsets one another.
Well, I say sometimes it does. Oftentimes it does. It doesn't have to, but sometimes it does. Titchener was a psychologist of the late 1800s, 1880, and he was on the verge of discovering this, and he was asking people, what did you have for breakfast? And what he found was that people who had gone to college couldn't tell you. They would say, you know, healthy meal. But the people who had gone to college, they would say eggs, and the yellows and the whites were this way and that way, and the bacon was this, and they would describe it. And the people gone to college, when he said, do you see it? And they go, no, I just had breakfast. So he drew this conclusion. The less intelligent you are, the more you see and hear and feel things. That was the conclusion he drew. The less intelligent you are, the less educated you are, you'll see and hear. And the more intelligent, you don't see and hear and sense things anymore. And so he missed the whole thing that came in 90 years later. So he was so close to it, but he drew the wrong conclusion. So now some people, when they learn words, they do override this, leave it. They just leave it, go away from it. But it doesn't have to be that way. And the best thing is just adding that to the words. If you're very global, the temptation may be that you've moved from here to the words, and you don't see and hear very well, and getting back to these details will help to fill out your thinking and representing and being able to operate at both levels simultaneously. And it'll be one of the things that you really want to do to master NLP, to be able to operate at both levels simultaneously and not make these opposites, not to polarize them. Okay, Derek?
One of the things that I find really helpful in my NSTT training is to translate what I'm going to say into movement.
Okay.
And I find that, well, is this kinesthetic or is it visual? Because I need to put it on a timeline,
Okay.
Visualize it, position in terms of space.
Okay.
And so I'm wondering which one is
Okay.
the primary one.
Okay. So what you've now brought up is what we call synesthesia. So synesthesia is when the representation systems cross each other. So it's a cross circuit. I say and I see. By saying, it brings up the image. Or by saying, it brings up the sensation, the movement, and the movement gives me the visual. So that's where you have a cross circuit. If you read early NLP books, it's called a fuzzy function. Whoever came up with that, I don't know. But it's a cross circuit. Now, this can be the source of great creativity and insight and intelligence. So I think it was Mozart who was said, after he'd gone deaf, that when he hears the music, he sees colors dancing. So there's hear, see. So, so those are synestasias, cross circuits. So, and you can do a synesthesia. So sometimes when we do a relaxation, as you hear the leaves in the trees rustling in the wind, as you hear that, you can feel more relaxed. Is inviting a synesthesia. Hear, feel. So some problems are synesthesia problems. I had some critical care nurses I worked with years ago, and one of them came in, and she had gotten to a place she could not be in the emergency room anymore. Because when she saw red, she felt terror. So she'd see blood, feel terror. So it wasn't the case so much she was associating into the experience, but she had created that connection, and now it was so anchored. To see is to feel the terror, and she got dysfunctional. She couldn't work in the emergency room anymore. So what I did, I took some reds. I had a whole set of, I just grabbed a whole bunch of things that had different colors of red, and I said, "Is that the color of blood?" And at first she was, it's hard to, and then then we would compare different reds. Is this more that color, less that color? So now she's trying to make distinctions between different shades and hues of red, so that she could see and see instead of see feel. So breaking that circuit. A lot of people have a hear feel circuit. They hear a harsh tone of voice. What are you doing? They hear that, and they just immediately feel. So they've got that circuit. They're not hearing and hearing. So what I used to do with people like that is to say, okay, I'm going to go through a series of harsh sounds and tell me, is this harsher than that? So why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? So getting them to make distinctions, hear and hear and hear, instead of hear, feel. So that's what a synesthesia is, a cross circuit which may be the source of great creativity and insight, or a real point of misery and hurtfulness. Okay?
Michael, how do we now incorporate this into memory? Like, how do we use this to deliberately remember things and not get into memory loss?
Okay. So the first, most obvious answer to how do you use this information for memory is that the richer you're thinking, the easier it is to remember it. Because you've made it redundant in multiple systems. So that's one of the reasons, expand every system so that it gets richer and richer, and that redundancy will hold memory. So when I talk to someone in a coaching context, I'm listening for the words. I'm putting it kinesthetically somewhere. So kinesthetically, I've put it somewhere. And so visually and kinesthetically, that word, sometimes I'll print the word in bright red in my mind, on the visible board. So Z is sitting there, and above his head, he tells me some belief, and I just put, I print it in red. Then the one above that, I'll put in that purple. The one above that in green. And one thing about memory is the more outrageous it is, the more weird it is, the more vivid it is, the more it'll stick in your mind. So that's one way to, the first way to use this. So that, and once again, sensorama land. The richer and the more senses you have there, the more you can encode, and when you encode it, it'll just be easier to remember. The next thing about memory is about intention. Because if you don't set the intention to remember it and to keep it in short-term memory, and then to repeat it enough so that it goes to longer-term memory, then it'll just be words in, words out. So intention is going to play a big part of that too, for a strategy for memory. So once we do some of the things, we might even play with that in the next couple of days, memory. We're going to do learning today, but we might go to memory tomorrow. Other things about this basic NLP. Does this remind you of your practitioner? Okay.
Karen is my
Karen.
name. Michael, what is the distinction you make between memory and learning?
Well, okay. For the most part, learning is discovering and comprehending something. Now, you can learn lots of things and not keep it. So memory is the keeping, the sustaining of that learning. Now, one thing that happens with learning that you don't have access to is when you overlearn, it'll drop, as it were. I mean, it's a metaphor. Metaphorically, we say it drops into the unconscious. What you're doing is programming yourself so that your body knows, neurology knows. Because this is the thing about memory. Memory is not just in the brain, it's all over the body. And we can encode things in the body. It's a big mystery. We really don't know how it works. But when you overlearn it, then it's available to you in terms of performance, but it may not be available in terms of consciousness. So this will actually play a big piece when you do modeling. An expert who has overlearned some expertise, and you say, how do you do that? They go, I don't know, I just do it. And they don't know, because now it's intuitive. So inside, and tuition, tuitive is knowledge or knowing, so it's in knowing. So the knowing is inside their body somehow, some way, and they just know it, but they can't speak it. And so part of the challenge of modeling, which we'll get to tomorrow, is helping them to recover that intuitive knowledge. And that's what Richard and John and Frank and the early NLP people did with Fritz Perls and Virginia Satir. They found some of the patterns that they had that they didn't even know, because it was now at the level of intuitive. So there are several differences between learning and memory. Most of the time we think of memory as something we have access to. When you don't have access to it, then it's more the program that's automatic, and if it's still functional, then it's fine. But if now the situation is different and I don't need that program anymore because it's redundant, I need to release it, unlearn it, let it go, so that I can have a different program. Okay? One more question and then we'll move right on.
When I first learned NLP, I heard that when you're a visual person and you want to go at something, when it feels right, then you do it. Is it right or?
I never heard that one. Who told you that? Yeah. Yeah, now this may be what Marzuki brought up, that some of those kinds of stupid statements that someone comes up with, that can be, questioned and disproved, and it goes against the ecology check to see if it really fits in a situation. We've got another list of, just to call your attention to, on page 46 of the submodalities. The three systems at the top, and then the language system, and then some of the qualities of these systems. This is going to become really important in the next 12 days. As you model whatever it is that you're going to model, this will take it down to the sensory level, to the primary level. It'll ground it in something, see, hear, feel, that is, it'll ground it in reality. And so we'll be coming back to using this, and these may be pages you'll come back to. Let me just go through and see, would any of these qualities of the visual system, the auditory system, play a big role in resilience or eating healthy or communicating respectfully. So we'll be coming back to those.